My name's Karen Glass and I'm Director in the Marsden Group.
Hi, my name is Ed Goold and I'm Counsel and COO of Ahado.
I'm Claire Carless, I'm the General Counsel at St Andrews Healthcare.
Lawyers and in-house lawyers have a particularly stressful role, highly paid, high personal expectations, and high expectations from the business to add value. In-house lawyers are particularly susceptible to pushing themselves and to burnout, to mental health issues as well. So I'm here with my panel today to talk about this conversation and to find out if we can work out any practical ways to look after yourself. And I'd be really interested to hear from you, Claire, about what you understand when you think about looking after yourself at work.
For me, I think that's too narrow a question. So it's about looking after yourself.
Full stop.
Full stop.
Yeah, good point.
And all through my career and continuing now, it's thinking about my work life as part of my overall life and not making work the biggest thing in my life or I mean, of course it's important to me, but not the be all and end all of my life. Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing is about maintaining perspective. So we all have a bad day at work, and it's going home at the end of the day and actually trying to put that into some kind of context, and not beat yourself up over the things that didn't necessarily go right. Yeah. It's important to have interests outside work, or for me it's always been my family, but something else that is important to you as part of your life that means that work doesn't become the main focus.
Yes. You did mention putting things into perspective, and I think that sometimes is difficult to do. What was it that enabled you over time to gain that perspective?
It's a skill that you need to develop. I don't think it's instinctive for us as lawyers, because you train to do a good job, you want to do a good job, it drives us on. I mean, that's part of our raison d'etre, and that's why we are successful at what we do oftentimes. So it is something that I think you have to consciously think about and manage for yourself, and people will have different ways of coping with that. I have to say, if you have children, that's a great leveller. So, getting home to a house that's a complete mess with paint everywhere, and that's sometimes more stressful than dealing with a difficult contract at work. But for me, that's been the balance, as I say, in my life, and allowed me to keep perspective on some of the trickier days when things don't always go to plan. Something I've always said is that if you're working for a commercial organisation, it's just money. And somebody else's money, usually.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
I think perspective is absolutely vital. So in my experience, I think any kind of mental health issues that I've had, or any kind of issues around stress or anxiety or whatnot, have all come from a complete lack of perspective. So I think as lawyers, we are asked to sort of carry out tasks in a certain way that encourages extreme focus and intensity and absolute accuracy, right? There's no kind of room for error.
Yes.
And that's quite an unnatural way of thinking, I think. And it encourages potentially a certain kind of tunnel vision, which is quite difficult to alleviate, and also sometimes quite difficult to be aware that you've really got into that unbalanced way of looking at the world and looking at your work. And I think the first thing is to recognise that perhaps one is becoming a bit too wrapped up in one's work, or one is thinking in too much of a sort of unhealthily focused way about what you're doing, and taking that home with you as well. So I think once you recognise that, then you can take a step back and try and regain some perspective.
And I think that tunnel vision is really, that's a key point, isn't it? With lawyers, we're focused. We have a job to be done, and we won't be swayed until that job's done. I mean, you sound like you're talking from experience. To a
certain extent, that's absolutely true. So my background, I spent a number of years in the city, and then subsequently moved into the public sector with the Treasury, and those were fairly kind of high pressure environments, and I think my personal experience is that on a number of different occasions I think kind of ended up in quite an unhealthy kind of environment from a kind of mental health perspective, and it took quite a lot of positive effort and I suppose kind of structure to sort of pull myself out of those kind of unhealthier unhealthier kind of environments, unhealthier ways of thinking.
Was there a support network? Was this something that work kind of helped you with?
I think, yeah, there were certainly support networks there, and they're really useful if you can take advantage of them. But I think a lot of the struggle is actually in your own head in the first instance. So it's kind of admitting to yourself that you are perhaps biting off more than you can chew, fundamentally, and admitting to yourself that perhaps you do need to seek help. You do need to reach out for support from other people.
I think the other challenge is that lawyers are good at what they do, and they're also very organised and structured, as you say, and are good project managers, and therefore will be asked to do more than just the legal bit. And we're very good at saying, of course I can do that, of course I can do that, of course I can do that. And we absorb a lot of work that actually sits outside the framework of what is the purely legal role, because we want to please, and we're very, very good at it. I think part of the challenge is for lawyers to say, actually that's not my job. Somebody else is responsible for that, for getting this bit of advice or making sure that piece of the project works effectively. Yes. Because we're just very good at absorbing it, and you know, with support of your GC or your head of legal, you need to think about strategies to push back on that.
Yes, that is such a vital point. It's about protecting yourself, like without being too selfish, looking after number one, because no one else is going to, are they? You know, whether it's in relation to your career development or looking after your mental well-being, no one else is going to do that.
No, that's right.
And that's why I was interested to hear about your support network, or because I can imagine that a group of lawyers working together in a room, all doing similar things, you know, might not notice that somebody is struggling. I was in a room of lawyers a while ago, and we were talking about what you do if you do notice somebody struggling, and it was quite an awkward conversation because people aren't used to having that conversation, are they? Especially lawyers.
Yeah, I think the idea that you might expose yourself or reveal some kind of vulnerability is something that really runs antithetical to the kind of identity that we like to portray or generate as lawyers. In a way, I don't think I would necessarily look for support from fellow lawyers, right? I think a lot of it is about sort of getting outside of the legal environment, getting outside of the legal way of thinking, and getting a bit more balance, a bit more perspective in your life by ensuring that you're not fully focused on work the whole time and thinking about it the whole time.
Yeah. So what did you do? What have you kind of
done
practically?
I think, you know, for me, moving out of the city was a big the first big kind of move that worked for me in terms of putting me in an environment that was less stressful and easier to manage. And then subsequently a move into tech, where I am now, has sort of pushed that on. But I think the common sort of element there is understanding that you can move, right, and that there are other options. And I think this goes back to what you were saying about it's just about money, right? It's not fundamentally, you know, something of, usually we're not working on things of great intrinsic importance, right? And so I think, you know, I think the key point, I suppose, or the key learning I take from sort of my journey is that there are alternatives out there, and you know, one should be alive to that and not feel trapped in one situation, because that was, I think, the characteristic that I felt most strongly in terms of when I was going through extremely stressful situations, what might be described as kind of mental health crises, I suppose, is that feeling of being trapped, that feeling of no alternative, that feeling of not being able to change your situation fundamentally.
So that's about nearly all we've got time for, but I just wondered, Claire, if you had any insights into what an organisation can do to help individuals or the employees around their wellness.
So really interesting listening to Ed's story and completely understand that as an individual, it's quite hard to expose yourself in that way, to seek help within an organisation. But I think from a corporate point of view, and for any manager of people, but particularly of lawyers, there are lots of things you can do in the practical sense to try and just help the whole team think about their well-being in a more holistic way. So some of the things that we do are walk and talk meetings. I'm fortunate that I work in a place with lovely grounds, so we might, on a nice summer's day, go for a walk around the grounds. And in team meetings, perhaps introducing a session on yoga or Pilates, and not everything is going to suit everybody, but there may just be one little nugget in there that will help one person who may be at a point of difficulty or crisis in their lives, that they might then be able to hang on to that to seek help or to look elsewhere for support. So that would be my top tip. And don't wait for your head of legal or GC to do it. If you're in a team, make those suggestions yourself.
Yeah. Thank you, I really appreciate that. It's really insightful. And thanks so much, Ed, for sharing your story too. And thank you so much for watching.